She was just the night cleaner, quiet, invisible, forgotten by most. But when the CEO caught her using his computer after hours, what he saw on the screen didn't just stop him. It shook him to his core, because the code she had written matched. The work of a mysterious genius who once saved his entire company. And now, that genius had a name. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now let's jump into the story. In the quiet hum of the late evening, the offices of Elecor Systems were nearly empty. Overhead lights flickered on timers, casting long shadows across polished floors. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and old coffee, and somewhere in the stillness, a soft clicking sound echoed. Fingers dancing across a keyboard. Mira Dawson moved quickly but carefully. Her gloved hands hovered over the company laptop placed on the massive glass desk of the CEO. She wore the blue jumpsuit of the evening cleaning staff, her hair tied back in a messy braid, her name badge tilted sideways from constant wear. Her eyes focused on the screen as lines of code appeared in soft green text, each keystroke deliberate, elegant, and somehow familiar to someone who might know how to look. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She wasn't supposed to be here, not at this desk, not on this machine. But when she passed the server room earlier, something had felt off. She'd noticed the error in the log report, a misaligned sequence in the server's backup protocol. The same kind of mistake she had seen once before, one that led to a company-wide shutdown. She had fixed it then, silently and anonymously, and she could fix it no. But just as she hit the return key to run a line check, a voice thundered through the silence, cold and sharp like broken glass. "What do you think you're doing?" Mira froze, her fingers hovering mid-air. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, caught between fear and guilt. Standing at the doorway, arms crossed tightly over his chest, was Graham Ellis, the CEO of Elecor Systems himself, his eyes sharp as razors, his jaw tight with disbelief. "He asked you a question," he said, stepping into the room, each step clicking with quiet authority across the marble floor. His tailored suit didn't even wrinkle as he moved. "This is a private terminal." "Who gave you access?" "I'm sorry," Mira said quickly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I didn't mean any harm. I just noticed something strange in the backup logs, and I thought maybe if I realigned the timestamp, it could prevent a failure." Raised his hand to cut her off, his tone hard. "You thought," he repeated, incredulous. "You're part of the janitorial team. You're not qualified to think about this kind of thing. You shouldn't even be in her." Reached for the phone on the desk, probably to call building security. His fingers brushed the receiver, but then something on the screen caught his eye. He blinked, leaned forward, and frowned. The code she had typed. It wasn't gibberish, it wasn't random, it was good, too good. He stared closer, his brow furrowing. The syntax, the formatting, the modular breakdowns, the shortcuts tucked into the comments. It wasn't just clean code, it was brilliant code, familiar too. Terrifyingly familiar. Stepped closer, his anger giving way to a different kind of energy. "Recognition, memory, disbelief is code," he muttered, eyes darting across the screen. "This structure, these tag formats, they're identical to the anonymous patch from last winter." Mira swallowed hard, her fingers trembling now as she lowered them to her sides. "You wrote this?" Graham asked, the tone in his voice no longer sharp, but uncertain, a touch of awe bleeding into the edge. Mira hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I didn't think anyone would notice. I just wanted to help. The vulnerability looked similar to the one you had last year, and He cut her off again. But this time he wasn't angry, he was stunned. "You're the one who sent that patch last December. The one that saved our system from total collapse. The one no one could trace." Nodded again, quieter this time. Yesh's eyes searched hers, seeing her fully for the first time. Not as the quiet woman who emptied trash bins and wiped glass tables, but as someone else entirely, someone he had never imagined could be hidden in plain sight. He whispered, "You signed that code with the initials." Mira nodded once more, her voice barely above a breath. Mira Brooks Dawson, she said. The B is for Brooks. Graham stepped back, processing everything. The anonymous code, the mystery. Developer, the quiet woman in the hallway each night with her mop cart and her downturned eyes. It didn't make sense, and yet somehow, it made all the sense in the world. You shouldn't be here, he said. But this time the words didn't carry judgment. Only quiet realization. No, she said, her shoulders falling slightly. But I couldn't. Just watch the system fail again. Not when I knew I could help. Graham looked back at the screen. The blinking cursor waiting for her next line of code. He took a breath, then stepped away from the desk. I'm not calling security, he said slowly. Instead, you're going to meet me here tomorrow at noon. And you're going to explain how I missed someone like you hiding in plain sight. Myra blinked. Startled by the sudden shift, she nodded, unsure if she should smile or remain. Frozen as he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her one last time, the confusion still in his eyes, but now joined by something else, curiosity, respect, maybe even the start of trust. And as Myra returned her eyes to the screen, a soft glow bathed her code in green light. Her hands hovered over the keyboard once more, her heart beating fast, but not from fear this time, from hope. The morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of the Elicor headquarters, casting a soft golden hue across the conference room walls. Outside the city buzzed with its usual hurry, but inside that room, time moved slower, heavier. As if it too was waiting to hear the truth. Mira sat at the far end of the long polished table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes focused on the cup of water placed neatly in front of her. She looked different now, her hair pulled back neatly, wearing a borrowed blazer over her uniform shirt, trying not to let her nerves show across from her set. Graham Ellis, the CEO who once only knew her as part of the cleaning crew. Today he watched her with eyes sharp but not unkind. His curiosity pressed against the quiet in the room. Between them, a silence stretched, thick with questions. Tell me everything, Graham said finally, his voice lower than it had been the night before. Not demanding, but serious. You said you used to work in tech. Mira nodded slowly, her voice soft and steady. I did, before all of this. I was a freelance developer, no formal degree, no fancy resume. Just someone who loved to build things. I worked contract jobs, mostly back-end systems, small firms, local startups. It was messy, but I was getting somewhere. Graham leaned forward slightly, and then he asked, what changed? Her fingers curled into her palms. Her eyes dropped to the tabletop as the memory came rushing back. I was working at a company called Braylock Industries, a finance firm that was expanding into digital payment systems. They brought me on to help optimize the payment gateway. It was just a 3-month contract, but I threw myself into it. Late nights, no weekends. I loved the challenge. Her voice wavered for a moment, but she kept going. One night while I was debugging a delay in transaction logs, I stumbled on a strange anomaly. It was small, a few cents here, a few dollars there, missing from random customer transactions. At first I thought it was a bug, but when I dug deeper, I saw it wasn't a mistake. Graham's brow furrowed. What was it? Somion had built a loop, she explained, a quiet siphon that skimmed tiny amounts from thousands of transactions and redirected them into a hidden account. It was smart, subtle, designed to be invisible unless you were really looking. It had been going on for months, maybe longer. So what did you do? Graham Askidi reported it, Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't accuse anyone. I just flagged the issue and sent it through internal channels. I thought they'd be grateful, maybe even impressed that I caught it, but they weren't. Graham guessed no, she said, her lips pulling into a bitter half smile. A week later, my contract was terminated early. They said the budget had shifted, but the timing was clear. My work badge stopped working. I couldn't access my email. I was told to leave immediately and handed a non-disclosure agreement. I refused to sign. Graham let out a slow breath. And after that, Mira said, no one would touch me. Word gets around fast in tech. I became the girl who stirred trouble, who went digging where she wasn't invited. No interviews, no callbacks, not even a freelance gig, I tried to explain. But the more I talked, the worse it got. What about legal action? Graham asked. Surely someone could have. I didn't have the money, she interrupted gently, or the energy. And I had someone else to think about. Graham tilted his head. Someone else, me daughter, Lena, she said. She's 7 now. Back then she was just a toddler. I couldn't afford to lose focus, so I took the first stable job I could find, janitorial. Work, steady pay. Night shift so I could be with her during the day. Graham sat back in his chair, the weight of her story sinking in. You were the one who saved our entire infrastructure, and you've been wiping down windows and emptying bins in our building. For almost a year. Mayra nodded once. I didn't expect anyone to notice, and I didn't want credit. I just couldn't ignore it. When I overheard your engineers talking about the system vulnerability, I recognized the signs, and I knew I could help. We now? Graham asked. Why take the risk again? She looked up at him, her eyes calm but filled with something deeper, a quiet fire. Because if I didn't, and something happened again, I wouldn't be able to live with it, because maybe I was done hiding. Graham watched her for a long moment, then stood and walked over to the window. The skyline stretched beyond the glass, powerful and distant. He tapped his fingers against the sill, then turned back to face. Here, you should have been leading a team, not scrubbing floors, he said quietly. The boardroom on the top floor of Elicor headquarters buzzed with tension. The long table was polished to a mirror shine, and at the head of it sat Graham Ellis, his fingers steepled together, his eyes sharp. He had called the meeting himself. But now that the room was full, silence settled in. Thick and heavy. 12 executives lined the table, all dressed in expensive suits and subtle suspicion. At the far end sat Halden Price, Chief Operating Officer, and the kind of man who always smiled like he knew something you didn't. Beside him, Nari Grayson sat quietly, her hands folded neatly, her eyes watching everything. Graham stood up slowly, his voice calm but clear. Thank you for being here on short notice. We have something important to discuss, a recent discovery inside our security systems, and the person responsible for saving us. Again clicked a button on the remote, and the large screen behind him lit up. Lines of code began to scroll, smooth, clean, perfect. For a moment, no one spoke, but recognition flickered across a few faces. This is the patch that stopped the last breach. Graham continued. The one we could never trace. The one that saved us from complete collapse, and now we know who wrote. I've paused, letting the silence grow heavy again. Her name is Mira Dawson, he said finally. She's been working here for months, not in tech, but on the janitorial staff. She discovered a new vulnerability this week, and without asking for anything in return, fixed it. She's the reason our infrastructure is stable right now. At the end of the table, Halden chuckled softly and leaned back in his chair. This is a joke, right? He said. A cleaner with a gift for coding. Next you'll be telling us the receptionist built our firewall. Graham didn't flinch. She was a developer before, he said, but she was blacklisted after exposing fraud at her last company. She's been surviving, not hiding, and her talent is real. Halden's smile faded, and his voice took on an edge. You brought her into our systems without clearance, without a contract, without background vetting. Do you realize what that means? He did it with full awareness of the risk. Graham replied, and I'd do it again, because the greater risk was ignoring what she could do. Nari finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Myra's story checks out. Her work is authentic. She never asked for access. She simply used an open terminal to correct something our team missed. Halden stood, pacing now, his voice rising. We are not a charity, Graham. We are a billion-dollar company with stakeholders and public scrutiny. If word gets out that we're letting a disgraced whistleblower access our systems from a mop bucket, the fallout could be massive. Egram's jaw tightened. So the truth is a liability now, he asked. We'd rather pretend she doesn't exist because it's cleaner for the board. You're compromising every legal safeguard we have. Halden snapped back. If this becomes public, it's not just her reputation on the line, it's all of ours. Myra stood just outside the door, listening, her heart racing. She hadn't meant to hear But the words hit like punches: disgrace, risk, scandal. She took a step back, ready to leave, to disappear again before the storm hit. But the door opened, and Graham stood there, eyes locked with hers. "Come in," he said quietly. Mira stepped into the room, all eyes turned to her, some curious, others skeptical. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her chin high. "This is Mira Dawson," Graham said to the room. "She's not here to ask for forgiveness. She's here because she earned the right to be hauled." And narrowed his eyes. "Miss Dawson, do you understand the position you've put this company in?" he said, his tone laced with control. "You accessed private systems without clearance, saw a failure coming." Mira replied, her voice even but soft. "And I stopped it, because I could, not to gain favor, not for revenge, just because it was the right thing." Alden shook his head. "What if we had decided to press charges? What if this turned into another media mess? We are trying to protect our reputation. You're not protecting anything," she said. "You're hiding. I've been silent for years. I didn't speak when I was erased from tech circles. I didn't speak when I was labeled a threat. I stayed quiet and worked hard and did what I could from the shadows." Room went still. "But I won't hide anymore," she continued. "If doing what's right costs your comfort, maybe your comfort was built on the wrong things." Graham looked around the room, then back at Halden. "We decide what kind of company this is right now," he said. "Are we one that rewards talent and courage, or one that buries it to stay safe?" Halden folded his arms. "The board will want answers then." "Give them mine," Graham said. "And if they have a problem with that, they can speak to me directly, because I will not let this company turn its back on someone who saved us twice." Mira stood quietly, her heart thudding in her chest, unsure if what just happened was a victory or the beginning of another war. But for the first time, she didn't walk away. She stayed. The stage lights glowed bright against the velvet curtains. The crowd murmured in anticipation as the tech summit reached its final session. The room was packed, not just with developers and investors, but with curious eyes and ears eager for something different, something real. Backstage, Mira Dawson stood alone, her fingers clutching a folded note card, her breath steady but shallow. She wore a navy blazer and soft gray slacks, her hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look like a janitor anymore, but she didn't feel like a star either. Somewhere in between stood the truth. Graham Ellis waited nearby, hands in his pockets, watching her with quiet reassurance. Lena, Myra's daughter, sat in the front row beside Nori Grayson, swinging her legs and holding a paper cup filled with juice. She didn't understand the weight of the moment, but she understood her mom was about to do something big. The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Please welcome the final speaker of the evening, the architect behind Elicor's groundbreaking security breakthrough, Mira Dawson." Applause filled the room as Mira walked across the stage. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She reached the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, then glanced at her note card. Her thumb brushed the edge, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked up and smiled, small but sincere. "Never imagined I'd be here," she began, her voice soft but clear. "Not because I doubted my work, but because I was told, over and over, that someone like me didn't belong." The crowd fell quiet. All eyes locked on Harry. "Don't have a computer science degree," she continued. "I didn't go to a top university. I don't wear a badge that says lead engineer. And for the last year, I've been cleaning the floors of the very building where this company runs." She paused, letting her words settle. "I used to write code while my daughter slept in the next room. Late nights, stolen time, I never stopped building. Even when the world stopped seeing me. When I tried to speak up once, I was pushed out, told I was a threat. Not a team player. I lost my job, my name, and my future. All because I told the truth." Samin in the back of the room shifted uncomfortably. "But no one looked away, so I stopped asking for space," she said, "and started building in silence. When I saw that Elicor's system was about to fail, I didn't send a resume, I sent a patch, anonymously, because I didn't need credit. I just needed to fix what I knew was broken. Screen behind her lit up with a visual of her code. Clean, elegant, exact. That patch saved the company. And no one knew it was me, she said. Until last week, when a new issue appeared, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I acted again, and this time, I was seen. She looked toward Graham, who gave a slight nod from the wings. I'm not here because someone gave me permission, she said. I'm here because I earned it, and because I refused to disappear. Room stayed quiet, held still by her voice. There are people all over the world like me, she said. People who don't look like what you expect, who don't have the titles or the background, but who can build and lead and change everything. If someone just stops to see them. She folded her note card and slipped it into her pocket. Doesn't wear a uniform, and courage doesn't wait for permission, she said. If you're building teams, build ones that listen. If you're building companies, build ones that look deeper. And if you're like me, keep building, even when no one sees you. Room erupted into applause. Not polite, but powerful. People stood, some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others nodded with the weight of understanding. Mir stepped away from the podium, walked calmly off the stage, and into the hallway behind the curtains. Graham waited for her there, holding Lena's little jacket in one hand and a soft smile on his face. That was something else, he said quietly. Mira didn't respond right away. She just exhaled, long and deep, like she'd been holding her breath for years. You did it. He said. No, she replied. We did it. But then she paused and shook her head gently. Actually, I did it first. You just finally caught up. Graham laughed, the kind that softened his entire face. A few feet away, Lena tugged at her mom's hand. Can we go get pancakes now? She asked. Because I was super good. Mira picked her up, kissed her cheek, and smiled. Absolutely, she said. Pancakes for champion. She walked out into the night together, the doors behind them closing on the past, the lights of the city twinkling ahead. And for the first time in years, Mira Dawson didn't feel like she was living in the shadows. She had stepped fully into the light, and it felt like home.